hiding all kinds of insecurities and worries and feelings of inadequacy and, hundreds of things.
He didn't die of old age, not of illness. He died because he carried a kind of love that Hollywood never allowed to exist. More than 6 decades have passed since The Parent Trap, yet Brian Keith still lives on as the warmest father figure on screen. But behind that gentle smile was a life he himself never truly got to live. A soul forced to hide its real heart for more than half a century. And today at 79, Hayley Mills, his daughter in that film, is breaking the silence for the first time. She reveals things never spoken before 3 marriages that were only a facade, a bond with a man he cared for until the day he died, the death of his daughter Daisy, as the final blow that shattered his spirit, and the conflicting details surrounding his own death details someone once tried to turn into suicide, to cover up a truth far more painful. In one conversation, Hayley recalled the cryptic lines he used to whisper behind the camera in 1961, words no one understood back then, but now, when pieced together, become the desperate message of a man forced to live against himself. If you think you already know Brian Keith, this may be the moment to look again, because some truths only surface when the last person who remembers finally dares to speak. Now, let's open the final door into his life. He married 3 wives, had 7 children, but the one person he cared for his whole life was a man. Hayley Mills said this like a blade slicing through the air. She didn't raise her voice, yet her tone was sharp and heavy, like the sound of a brittle branch breaking after winter. When speaking of Brian Keith, she didn't call it a secret, but a tragedy. Because in her memory, that love was not only hidden, it was suppressed until it began consuming him from the inside. Back then, Hollywood was a land of glamour, but also walls you couldn't touch. A leading man even grazing the edge of such rumors, just being in the wrong place with the wrong person at the wrong time, could be erased from the studio system as if he had never existed. Brian Keith understood this better than anyone. But by the late 1980s, cracks appeared in those walls. A confidential reporter accidentally spotted Keith leaving the tool shed, a place long known within the local community in Palm Springs near midnight. He walked beside a man with glasses and a gentle look described as a young writer of a major television series. They didn't hold hands, didn't embrace, didn't do anything noticeable in public. But there was something between them that made the reporter pause, the way Brian lowered his head slightly, too low to be casual. The way he placed his hand gently on the man's back like a protective reflex, and most of all, the way his eyes flickered when he utilized the camera. Panic like a man caught in the most vulnerable moment of his life. A witness later told The Globe. He looked around like someone running away, but running from himself. Rumors swirled quietly, but fiercely. The press didn't dare target Brian directly, but released cryptic lines. A television father with a shadowed heart. A man who cannot name his own feelings. A man who lives 2 lives under one skin. No one said orientation. No one said relationship. But everyone understood. The silence wasn't respect. It was fear of the studio machinery that had invested millions into his perfect father image. Those who knew pretended not to. Those close to him acted blind. Only Keith couldn't outrun his own heart. Ironically, his first reaction to the scandal was to get married. So quickly, his friends hadn't even processed what was happening. Victoria Young, his third wife, beautiful, talented, always smiling, the kind of smile taught in etiquette classes for celebrity spouses. The wedding was small, cold, heavy, on ceremony rather than affection. Brian smiled in all the photos, but it was forced, and his eyes were hollow. A friend of the bride later revealed, on the wedding night, Victoria said he held her like he was holding an object, not a person. She said he felt cold down to the bone. After the wedding, Brian tried to become the man the world expected. He brought his new wife to parties, took meticulously arranged family photos, laughed on talk shows as if nothing on earth could hurt him. But the truth was different. To those close to him, he became distant in a frightening way. With his wife, he was polite and gentle, but never truly present. With his children, he was kind and responsible, but affection seemed controlled by logic, not emotion. Hayley never forgot visiting a set in 1983. Victoria arrived, stood beside him, slipped her arm into his. Keith immediately pulled away, muttering about an upcoming scene, though he still had 20 minutes. A tiny moment, yet enough for Hayley to understand this wasn't a marriage of two people seeing each other. It was the marriage of a man in hiding, in a desperate attempt to forget the one he truly loved. Keith even threw himself into fleeting encounters with multiple women, as if he believed attraction could replace affection, or at least distract him from longing for the other man. A makeup artist at me now recalled, he kissed me in the dressing room. It wasn't the kiss of a man drawn to a woman. It was the kiss of someone trying to prove something to himself. Many women shared similar stories, warmth without connection, passion without presence. They all sensed something buried deep inside him, and they knew they weren't the person he was searching for. There was even a strange incident. Keith once brought a supporting actress back to his hotel, but when she stepped out of the bathroom, he was sitting alone, smoking, eyes red, whispering, "I'm sorry. I can't pretend I care for women." And then came what happened to the man from those blurry paparazzi photos. For 6 months after the scandal, the man was still seen with Keith, working out at 6 a.m., sharing late dinners, after filming slipping away for secret weekend trips into the desert. Then he vanished. Completely. No goodbye, no note, no explanation, no new work credits, no name in any show after 1989. Hayley believes that was the moment Keith changed, entirely withdrawn, fearful, drinking, more snapping without reason. He kept acting, kept smiling, kept answering interviews, but something essential inside him was gone, and she still believes. He didn't just lose someone he cared for. He lost the only chance he ever had to live as himself. Looking back, 3 marriages, the desperate attempts at normal, the encounters with women to forget another man, the mysterious disappearance of his partner, you no longer see America's beloved television star. You see a man trapped in a cage built by society. A man forced to perform his own life every day. A man who cared for the wrong person at the wrong time, in the wrong context, under the wrong rules. He didn't lie to anyone, Hayley whispered, except his own heart. And that was the most painful role Brian Keith ever played, a role he was never allowed to end. He died because his heart had already broken months before, after losing the only person who truly hurt him. Hayley said this while looking at Brian Keith's final photograph sitting by the window of his Malibu home, holding Daisy's picture frame, eyes drifting away as if something precious was slipping out of his life. A man once so strong. Hollywood called him a stone that could act now reduced to a soft, collapsed figure drained of life. Daisy Keith was the child Brian loved the most, not because she resembled him, but because she was the only one who could see through the armor he wore to survive. In every other child, he saw a role to fulfill father, protector, provider. But in Daisy, he saw himself sensitive, fragile, filled with silences no one else could understand. Many recalled how they spoke in a strange way. Few words, but one look was enough. Once, Daisy told her mother, "Dad isn't sad because of life. Dad is sad because he can't live his own life." No one understood, except Daisy. In April 1997, Daisy, 27, working on a promising role in Heartland, disappeared from set. When they found her in her Los Angeles apartment, it was too late. Severe depression, a single pill, a short note in pencil. In her journal, police found lines that nearly destroyed Brian, Dad. "I know why you're never happy. Because the one you care for is never allowed to exist. I'm sorry for leaving you alone with that silence." Hearing this was another bullet to his heart. He didn't cry publicly, but Hayley said she once saw him break. He covered his face, breathing hard, then said, "There's no reason left to live." His voice was thin as wind. In the days that followed, Keith wandered through the large Malibu house, overlooking the Pacific. At night, he sat on the balcony bottle on the floor, wind tangling his silver hair, staring at the ocean, as if searching for someone who would never return. Friends visited, no answer. Children called, no reply. His wife sent meals to his room. He asked her to leave them outside. His footsteps echoed through the hall like a man carrying stones in his chest. A close friend said he sometimes sat for hours in Daisy's room, no lights, no sound, his hand resting on the shirt she left behind, tracing the seams like he was smoothing her hair. On the night before his death, June 23rd, 1997, something strange happened. A neighbor, Lorraine Cutter, reported hearing a loud argument around 11 p.m. Two men's voices, one deep that was Brian, the other sharper, higher. "I heard, you cannot talk about this." Then a loud crash like a chair overturning. The odd thing, no one else was supposed to be in the house. His wife was in Arizona, his children in New York. No security guards, no staff. No one knows who the second man was. Police records never mentioned him. The next day, June 24th, Brian was found on the sofa in the living room, the same brown leather sofa where he used to watch TV with Daisy. A single gunshot. Malibu police quickly called it self-inflicted. But the report had inconsistencies. No note despite Keith's meticulous nature. His right hand reeked of strong alcohol, as if someone forced him to drink. Two sets of fingerprints on the glass beside him. His body, in an unnatural posture, like he had lost balance. And strangest of all, the back door lock was broken open, dismissed as the wind. A forensic technician later whispered to a journalist, something wasn't right. Too many wrong details. But the case was closed in 48 hours. Rumors followed. Some said he'd been given alcohol and strong sedatives. Some believed the man who argued with him knew the truth about his private life, and that truth was not allowed to surface. A longtime fan wrote in 2002, "He didn't take his own life. He just lost the strength to fight the world that made him pretend for too long." When Hayley Mills was asked about his death, she gave only one chilling line. He didn't die from grief. He died from silence. And some silences end a life faster than any bullet. Brian's final days were the full stop of a story written long before. He roamed his empty house, touching Daisy's photo, winding the clock she gifted him, opening and closing old journals. Once, he stood before a mirror for minutes, staring deeply, as if searching for the real man beneath the performance he lived all his life. A neighbor recalled, "That last night, I saw him standing on the balcony facing the ocean. He stood there for a long time, gripping the railing. He didn't look like someone planning anything. He looked like someone waiting for someone. Waiting for whom? No one knows. Or perhaps they do. Just no one dares to say." Brian Keith's death wasn't a single shot. It was the collapse of every boundary he carried for years. It was the pain of losing Daisy, the only soul who understood him. It was the solitude of a heart never allowed to care openly. It was the weight of secrets he took with him. And as Hayley Mills said in her latest interview, no one ended his life with a weapon. It was Hollywood's silence and the life they forced him to live that ended him. The price of freedom is a lifetime of acting. That is the first sentence Hayley Mills remembers when she is asked about her days with Brian Keith on the set of The Parent Trap. She doesn't recall exactly when he said it, but she remembers the scene, midday sun beating harshly onto the concrete floor of the Burbank lot, and he stood there, back to the camera eyes, fixed on a strange man walking out of the service gate. Back then, she was just a 15-year-old girl, taking her first steps into the film world, still believing everything in Hollywood sparkled like a magazine cover. Brian was 40, already far too familiar with what lurked behind the lights. He wasn't like other men, Hayley recalls. At first, I thought he was difficult distant, but the closer I got, the more I felt like he was someone carrying something very heavy inside. Once, after an exhausting underwater scene, Hayley was called to the back of the studio to change costumes. As she walked down the dark hallway behind stage 3, she saw Brian sitting alone in a corner, a cigarette between his fingers but not lit. The security light shining through the window cast half his face into shadow. She was about to say hello, but he signaled for silence. Then he pointed out toward the yard where a black car was parked. A stranger in a white shirt stepped out, walking quickly toward the service entrance. He didn't look around, just nodded to the guards and disappeared inside. Brian watched him, lips pressed tight as if swallowing words. Then he murmured in a low voice, barely above a breath, "He shouldn't be here. It's too early to get involved." Later, when Hayley asked about it, he just forced a smile and changed the subject. But that wasn't the only time he said things half literal, half metaphor, like that. Throughout the filming of The Parent Trap, Brian often pulled Hayley away from the crowd after lunch to walk around the prop buildings. He never really talked about his family, nor did he say much about the craft. But sometimes he would stop and drop a line that meant nothing to a teenager. Then yet now, she sees them as puzzle pieces slowly fitting together. Some people here survive by lying. Living honestly can be more dangerous than playing the villain. Some contracts in Hollywood don't just have signatures, they have blood. Once when Hayley burst out laughing, thinking he was joking, Brian's face turned serious, and he said slowly, "You'll see, in this town, not everyone gets to live as themselves." There were rumors, and only rumors, that in 1961, a quiet scandal involving money laundering and abuse of power took place within a financial branch of Disney, connected to a backstage fund for children's film production. No proof or official record, but a few members of the Parent Trap crew suddenly left the business, vanishing as if they had never existed. One of them was a production assistant named Carl J. Larkin, who'd been caught in a heated argument with a Disney executive in late July 1961, just weeks after The Parent Trap wrapped. Larkin was believed to have damaging information about murky funds tied to a children's programming support scheme, and had allegedly declared he would expose everything if he was fired. Brian Keith had met Larkin. Hayley remembers clearly one afternoon when Larkin rushed onto the lot and whispered something into Brian's ear. They spoke in a corner of the set. No one heard what they said. But after that day, Brian began to change. He smoked more, drank stronger coffee, stared into space like a man who hadn't slept for nights. He stopped making jokes, stopped asking Hayley about her co-stars. And most strikingly, he began arriving on set very early, too early, even when he had no scenes that morning. After the movie wrapped, Brian disappeared for nearly a month. No one could reach him. Director David Swift said he had gone further than a normal vacation. When he returned, he was withdrawn, his words broken and hesitant. Once he sat in front of a makeup mirror for hours without moving. Hayley asked if something was wrong. He only replied, "There are things that if you knew them, you'd never see Hollywood as beautiful again." Years after his death, looking back at the events of 1961, Hayley began to wonder, had Brian seen or learned something no one was allowed to know? Was that man in the black car that day not just a friend, as the press called him? Was the shadow hanging over his spirit not only the shadow of a forbidden attachment, but the shadow of something far more dangerous? "I used to think he disliked me," Hayley says. "He would snap, withdraw, shut down. But now I know he didn't dislike anyone. He just disliked the real self he was never allowed to become. And perhaps he also disliked the world that forced him to live like a character, no final act, no proper ending." Some believe the secrets Brian carried from that summer of '61 were the very reasons he remained under control until the end of his life. The things he told Hayley weren't life advice, but desperate signals from a man who had seen the backside of the spotlight and could never unsee it. The price of freedom is a lifetime of acting. Now that line is no longer metaphor. It is the perfect summary of Brian Keith's life, a man who once stood between light and shadow and could never fully step into either. Hayley Mills ended the conversation with a whisper, some words no one understands, until the person who said them is gone. There are deaths called suicide only because no one dares name the one truly responsible. Hayley Mills looked straight into the camera when she said that. No trembling voice, no theatrical emotion, just a calm stillness, as if she had mulled over this for decades and finally decided it was time to speak. And that sentence, just a few words, was enough to pry open everything people thought had closed around Brian Keith's death. The 1980s were the years Brian Keith survived a career slump. After the huge success of Family Affair in the 60s, he seemed to retreat into a quiet life. Then, in an odd twist, he accepted the lead in a new television series, Hardcastle and McCormick, 1983 to 1986, produced by a major Los Angeles company, rumored to have financial ties to a private fund of uncertain origin called New Line Assets. The show was unexpectedly successful, but few knew that behind the stunts and car chases were closed-door meetings where people spoke of trading roles for financing, rewriting scripts to legitimize cash flow and other financial terms never taught in any screenwriting course. An anonymous crew member once told Industry Confidential in a special issue pulled after 2 days. There were episodes that barely had any story yet. The budget doubled overnight. Someone was using this show to move money from places no one could trace. The head writer for the early seasons, a screenwriter named Michael Kay, was very close to Brian. They were often seen leaving the lot together, sometimes sitting late at a bar, drinking without talking much, just looking at each other in silence. Crew members joked that they share something way beyond a script. Then suddenly, in 1986, after the final season of Hardcastle and McCormick, Michael disappeared. No resignation, no farewell party, no biography entry in the Writers Guild records. No one knew where he'd gone. Calls went unanswered. The line disconnected. His home address seemed to vanish. Even in industry databases, his name disappeared from the show credits. An independent journalist named Jared Sloan tried to investigate the case for Variety Underground, but was kicked out of the newsroom after 3 days. The reason the piece was withdrawn: for legal safety. Sloan lost his job a month later. Hayley remembers a final conversation with Brian in 1991 during a chance encounter at a restaurant in Santa Monica. He looked older, thinner, with sunken eyes and sallow skin. But one thing hadn't changed: the guarded look whenever a stranger walked past their table. He told me, "I once knew someone who knew too much, and so he was made to disappear. I asked if he meant Michael, and he just smiled faintly and looked out at the ocean, as if he was speaking, but not allowed to." After Daisy's death, and before he took his life, or was pushed into taking it, Brian Keith was believed to be holding some old documents from the Hardcastle years. A close friend, a lighting technician named Roger D., recalled Brian had a locked box. Inside were copies of contracts, budget breakdowns, and unused script drafts with red notes in the margins. Where is this money from? Who signed this? Makes no sense, but approved. He told me, "I don't believe this is just a TV show. I think it's the front for something else." Those were his final notes. 2 months later, Roger died in a car accident on his way to a meeting with an independent lawyer who had once helped Brian prepare documents. His car lost control and hit a bridge barrier. Police said he fell asleep at the wheel. But data from the black box showed the brakes didn't work and the car had been serviced 2 weeks earlier. Brian Keith's death after Daisy was gone no longer felt like a personal tragedy. It was a suspicious full stop. And what unsettled people most was the absolute silence of Victoria Young, his third wife. Since the 1997 funeral, Victoria has never given an interview, never made a public appearance. No tribute articles, no memoir, no statements about the man who shared her life for nearly 3 decades. She refused every request, even from major networks like CBS and ABC. In legal filings, she remained silent in all matters involving wills and assets. A host named DC once asked Hayley, "Do you think Victoria knows something we don't?" Hayley only shook her head. "I think she knows more than all of us put together. But some truths are protected at a very high price." In 1998, among the press archives, someone found a strange fax sent to the LA Times office with no sender's name. It contained just one line: "He knew too much." So they gave him the kind of death nobody questions. The fax was never verified, but it sits there among thousands of old pages like a ghost that refuses to fade. Now that all the lights are off, those who remain can only look at Brian Keith as someone swallowed by Hollywood, a quiet soul carrying more secrets than roles, a fractured father, a man who knew something that cost him his life at the weakest moment. Maybe he wasn't directly killed, Hayley says, but he was pushed to the point where he had to die. And that, too, is a way of ending someone through isolation, through threats no one dares record, and through fear that eats the mind alive. Sometimes the end is not a period. It is the final contract signed by those who know too much. I wish he had ever been allowed to live as himself. People often say death doesn't take everything. It only takes the body. What's left behind the unsaid words, the truths never spoken, and the realities that could not be voiced stay in the hearts of those who survive. For Hayley Mills, Brian Keith is exactly that kind of remnant. Not just the screen father, not just the old co-star, but someone she misses. Someone who lived his whole life as a role trapped between the stage lights and the darkness in his own mind. On a late winter afternoon in 2024, Hayley shared a dream that had haunted her for years. In the dream, she saw Brian standing alone on an empty stage, no audience, no applause. He still wore the gray coat from the Parent Trap set with a spotlight from the ceiling, illuminating half his face, the other half buried in shadow. At first he said nothing, just stood there quietly. Then as she stepped closer, he whispered, "They won't remember who I am, Hayley. They'll only remember who I was on screen." She answered, "I won't. I remember you standing outside the studio quietly smoking. I remember you staring at the ocean without saying a word." And he smiled a smile she had never seen in any film. She woke up with tears soaking her pillow. For years, she kept that dream to herself. Until now. In memorial segments for the legends of Hollywood's golden years, Brian Keith's name rarely appears. No grand statue, no dedicated documentary, no explosive memoir. He doesn't belong to the kind of legend set on a marble pedestal. Nor did he live long enough for Hollywood to learn how to apologize to those it forced to pretend. He was just a man who once cared and was forced to care in ways that hid who he was. A father who tried to protect his daughter but was powerless against his own pain. An actor who spent a lifetime in character until he no longer knew where the script ended and his own life began, and in the end, that role killed the human being inside him. Hayley remembers the last time she saw him truly laugh. Not on camera, not at a press event, but in an ordinary moment. In 1990, they met at a small diner in Ventura. She told him about a stray cat that had sneaked into the dressing room and turned the chute upside down. Brian burst out laughing. That laugh, unguarded, unperformed, was the first time she saw him living like a normal person. He rubbed his forehead, tilted his head, and said, "Truth is, getting to be yourself, even for a few minutes, is the greatest gift." She didn't think much of it then. But now, looking back, it feels like a quiet farewell, as if he knew he would never live as himself, at least not while he was alive. If she could say one thing to him now, Hayley wouldn't say thank you, nor if only. She would simply whisper, "I wish you'd had the chance to live as yourself." Not needing public approval, not needing to reveal every secret he carried. Just to breathe correctly, to laugh at the right time, and to care for someone without hiding. We, the ones left behind, may never need the full truth. We don't need to know the name of the man he cared for. We don't need to track where an anonymous fax came from. We don't need a final answer on whether he chose to die or was cornered into it. We only need to remember that there once was a man named Brian Keith, beloved by millions for roles that warmed American hearts, who spent his life in the cold of a hidden truth. Brian Keith is not a statue. He doesn't need to be a myth. He is the sigh at noon, the unlit cigarette in someone's hand, the gaze following a figure leaving the stage, the line echoing in the wind. The price of freedom is a lifetime of acting. And now, perhaps, he has finally stepped out of the role. Brian Keith lived his whole life like a character, but he never had the chance to bow and leave the stage. Now that the lights have gone out, those who remain like Hayley, like us, can only retell his story as a late farewell. And if you too have ever been moved by someone drowned in silence, in the system, in things no one dares to say, leave a comment below. Share what you feel about freedom, about the price of loving at the wrong time, or simply write his name so Brian Keith can be remembered not just for his roles, but for the man he truly was finally named out loud. Don't forget to like and share if you feel this is a story worth hearing. Sometimes just one share is enough to keep an old truth from being buried again. So, see you in the next journey where other hidden corners of Hollywood will be uncovered little by little.